Welcome to Making the Cut podcast with Chris Hill and Sean Winter, where we help you succeed in life and business by sharing principles and strategies that guide some of the most successful people in the world.
Welcome to episode 31 of the Making the Cut podcast. I'm Chris Hill with my co-host, Sean Winter. Today on the show, we have the privilege of chatting with Richard Blais, a celebrity chef, restaurateur, and entrepreneur. But before diving in, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
If you want to pursue a career in the food industry, Le Cordon Bleu is the largest network of culinary and hospitality schools with more than 35 institutes in 20 countries around the world. Le Cordon Bleu not only offers you one of the most respected culinary qualifications in the industry, it also gives a once-in-a-lifetime multicultural experience. You can be part of a 120-year legacy and join for a lifelong journey on your pathway to culinary mastery. You can apply at cordonbleu.edu. So with that, Chris, I know you are extremely excited to talk to Richard Blais today, because the moment I told you he was coming on the show, you texted me a picture of the signed cookbook, right?
Yeah, man. One of the only two cookbooks I've really only taken recipes from and put them to use is Try This at Home, his first cookbook, which is it's great. And I've been a fan of his for a long time, especially because his first really big stint in the industry was in Atlanta. But if you don't know Richard Blais, he's perhaps most recognizable as the winner of Bravo's Top Chef All-Stars. He's a successful chef, restaurateur, cookbook author, and television personality. After graduating from the Culinary Institute of America, he went on to train at the French Laundry, Daniel, Chez Panisse, and El Bulli. He's appeared on numerous TV shows as a competitor, judge, and host. He currently owns and operates Trailblaze, a forward-thinking culinary company that has consulted on, designed, and operated popular eateries, including multiple outposts of Flip Burger Boutique, located in the Southeast, and most recently, Crack Shack and Juniper and Ivy in Southern California. Additionally, he's a podcast host with his wife, Jazmin, entitled Starving for Attention. And with that, wait till we hop in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Richard Blais, thank you so much for joining us. How's it going today?
Oh my gosh, I am excited to be finally to hook up with you guys and chat. So excited to be here.
Thanks for joining us, man. Well, I know a lot of our audience is in the restaurant hospitality space and is probably familiar with you, but maybe just give a little bit of a background to your career and what's gotten you here.
Wow. I'll give you this sort of elevator pitch is, I fell into this industry. My first job was at a tiny little restaurant that maybe you've heard of called McDonald's. And then literally it was just rung after rung and a slow, steady grind to, all the way up into Michelin-starred restaurants. Eventually, started running my own restaurants and, I'm in a place right now where, I guess I'm transitioning from being a chef to a true restaurateur, dare I say brand. I always think that once you say brand, it gets a little scary for me just with the chef background. You don't want to come off a certain way, but I guess that's the quick sort of spiel on, from McDonald's to being your own brand, I guess.
So Richard, what would you say was one of the defining moments or points early in your career that put you on this now trajectory with where you at?
Wow. I think the defining moments, I just think it was being in a restaurant and not feeling like it was a job and literally, having the ability to sort of spend 14 or 15 hours a day, in a kitchen at that time, go home and then want to spend another, 2 or 3 hours watching food or studying food and not having it feel like a job, So, I think it's sort of baseline knowledge, but I think anytime that you're, we use the word passion, but that's passion when you're like spending that much time and it doesn't feel like work. So I think just, pretty early on, I realized that. And I think that's what sort of, helped because you need that work ethic, whatever it is. I think especially now when we're talking about entrepreneurship, it's a cool thing. Everyone wants to do it. Everyone wants to start their own business. But you got to really grind it out. So there's no sort of simple path to success. And there certainly wasn't for me.
Richard, you kind of glossed over some important points. I think you went to the CIA. You worked for some of the best chefs in the industry, Keller, Balud, even a small stint with Ferran Adria and out at Chez Panisse. What did some of these opportunities, first of all, Those are absolutely incredible. What set you up for that? Was it school? And then what did you maybe kind of learn from some of those experiences?
Yeah, I mean, again, it does go, I did gloss over, I guess, some of the bigger named places that I spent time at. But it really was, it was work ethic and just a desire to know something. I didn't, graduate with any sort of degree. I wasn't like a young person who had a clear path. So, once I found food, I was really just on a quest to sort of learn as much as I can, as quick as I could, because I've always felt, I still do feel like I'm a little bit behind the ball, and I have a lot of catching up to do. But so it was really just that desire to learn and then just keep pushing myself to, be in places that could provide me more knowledge. Right. So, when you have the ability to sort of work for nothing and work at a Michelin-starred restaurant or work at that great restaurant, in your city or town, I realized that I could do that. I didn't need much. And that, the knowledge, I hoped at the time that the knowledge and the time and the work put in would eventually pay off. I never would have thought that it would, have gotten me to where I am now. But it was really just that desire to sort of want to know something and be an expert in a field, which at the time unknowingly was, about to sort of, burst upon the popular scene, if you will.
So, Richard, some people have a misconception about the timeline for success and the timeline that it takes to achieve certain things. And so when people look at you, they may make assumptions. If you were to say you are a X amount of years overnight success in the making, put in real terms so people can really understand and they don't just see that tip of the iceberg. What in real terms has this timeline been for you to get to where you are?
I feel like I did it really fast. And again, I just want to preface, I don't really feel like I'm that successful now. Like there's still a lot of things I want to accomplish. But I would say I did it fast, and I feel like it was 10 to 12 years, paid my dues and tried to do it each and every step along the way, even though I knew I had to expedite that process. So I don't think there's an overnight, strategy. If there is, maybe some of your other guests have had it. I'd like to know what it is to get to the next level myself. But, I think in our world, definitely in the chef world, the restaurateur world, the celebrity chef world, I do feel like it's sort of 10 years is, and 5 if you're incredibly talented and laser focused on exactly where you want to go.
Love it. And just to clarify what I was kind of referring to, some people say that they're a 20-year it's taken them 20 years to then become an overnight success. Essentially, that's kind of where I was going with it. Yeah. So
that makes sense. Yeah. So it took about I think most people would say that probably Top Chef, like my first run on Top Chef, was sort of that overnight sort of moment, and it took 10 or 12 years to get to a point where a television show like Top Chef was calling me to cast me. So that makes sense to me.
When you were on Top Chef, that was obviously a pivotal point in your career. For my book, I interviewed Fabio Viviani, and he talked about, between the taping of the show and when it came out, I had 6 months or whatever of downtime where I could get my brand kind of in line so that I could really hit the ground running once it aired. What was that like for you?
Yeah, well, Fabio is a dear friend of mine, and he's much more. And certainly at that time, I think was much more calculated. I think Fabio knew the play that he was making, that it was, his time on the show was more about exposure and setting up his businesses. I'm not as perhaps as smart or I wasn't at the time as Fabio was. So for me, I guess I sound silly, but I didn't really have a strategy at all. Like my strategy was, to try and go on this show and win because I really liked sports and I was competitive, but I had no idea that it would, create a brand awareness, or, that I would have companies, sending me emails to work with them. And, for me, even a lot of people think it is calculated because a lot of my work was sort of science-based and technique, and I worked with a lot of like specialized equipment. It kind of worked for me, but none of it was intentional. I just liked cooking delicious food that was unique and had a sense of authorship. And whether it was with, cooking with a immersion circulator and cooking sous vide or cooking with liquid nitrogen, those things just sort of on their own created a brand that then I really despised afterwards. Like I've spoken about this many times when I do sort of lectures is that it really bothered me that early on with that overnight success, people would just think that I was the weird science chef, and I was only getting television segments that were like Halloween focused, and people were saying things like, "Can you do food but make it blow up?" and "Can you make it smoke?" and like that was never really the point for me as a chef. Well, to deliver food that was that would go viral, but it's certainly a part of what people sort of attach themselves to.
Richard, what was kind of unexpected or surprising once you kind of got thrust into the limelight and you did Top Chef, and now again you're kind of mentioning all the things that you went through? What kind of either took you back or was surprising or unexpected with that whole process? So maybe people that are thinking of going on a show and they might get thrust into the limelight, they can maybe either prepare for or expect.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it's still surprising every day, is just that once you get to a certain popularity, you have this responsibility, not just as a business person or for your brand or for your team specifically, but like, you have to be, it makes you a better person because you have fans. And like, I'm just still always blown away by the fact that, people send me DMs and messages and, say that they're a fan of my work and that they love me, or that someone in their family just, I inspired someone to do something. So like, to me, that was surprising, that that I was going to have this real personal effect on people's lives, and that's something that it just blows me away. That you can go on a television show, or you can create a brand, or you can have X amount of followers on social media, and then all of a sudden, you're a part of someone's life, like you're in their life. It's not just like they see you on TV and they like your food, or they come to your restaurant and it's delicious. Like, you become sort of a part of them and you inspire people. And that, to me, is still the most important thing, especially this year, just having that, understanding that everything that I do, can really affect someone. It's some high gravity stuff. Hopefully I'm not making this too serious. But, I think that at this moment in time, especially, like, that's good business, and I think this year in 2018, that's something that I'm really trying to do is, over the last couple of weeks specifically, change up my social media game and really interact more with, what, celebrities might call the random fan. Like, if you take a step towards me, I'll take one back towards you, because, that's how the whole thing grows. That's how you do good business, whether it's a restaurant or, again, a social media brand or, a company selling a product. Having that sort of that interaction with your guest or your client is so important. So it's something that I don't take lightly.
I love it. Well, and as you talk about that kind of stuff, I'm actually holding your first cookbook, Try This at Home. I was already living up here in Virginia when it came out, but my sister got me a signed copy, which you personalized nicely for me. So you were at least doing it some back then as well. But love it. And I'll tell you this, I've been cooking for a long time, and there's only 2 cookbooks that I've taken recipes straight from and actually applied them. Yeah, I'll draw inspiration from a number of them, but it's yours and the French Laundry Cookbook. So you're in good company there.
Wow. Yeah. I was going to say that's the French Laundry Cookbook. That's a heavy cookbook. I was always, as a cook who cooked at the French Laundry before that book came out, I was always upset that they released a book, because at that time, cooks and chefs had like little moleskins, and you would just write recipes down from the whole restaurant. And it was like a very special thing that you had sort of the keys to the code, of a great restaurant. And then they released their book, and they actually, and of course they put out their real recipes. And I was like, oh wow, what a waste of time to handwrite all those recipes. Now I can just buy this beautiful book.
Exactly. Well, I had it too, and I went to Per Se this last year, and I finally said, oh, this is what the oysters and pearls is supposed to taste like.
Yes. Yeah. There you go. I've only had the remix. I've only had Richard Blais's remix, which is a totally different dish.
No, I was just referring to me trying it at home.
Nice. No. Oh, there you go. Yeah. It is a tough dish, but oysters and pearls is a dish I'm still cooking in my restaurant, Juniper and Ivy, here in San Diego, which is also really an interesting thing. Like, I grew up sort of like a 90s hip hop kid. And this idea of like borrowing or sampling to create another, in music, obviously it's a sound or a beat, but in food, like remixing food and really sort of taking this idea of mashing things up, whether you want to call it fusion or, remixing something, has always been something that I love, so I guess it's a little bit more like street art, if you will. Listen, to mention my name or my cookbook with the French Laundry Cookbook, that's pretty amazing. And I'll teach you how to make Thomas Keller's oysters and pearls one day. We can do that.
I would love it. I would love it. Well,
Chris, I'm sorry. You said 90s hip hop, so I'm going to say Mobb Deep, Camp Lo, Roots, Tribe Called Quest. What would you go with, or all of the above?
I'm dropping in some like the reggae siren horn right there. I mean, I was listening like yesterday. I put up a post on social that was like me listening to Nasty Nas, Illmatic, probably the best album ever created across any genre of music.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I kind of grew up that kid. All of those groups and those performers are just insane. It depends on your mood. If you're chilling out, Tribe Called Quest. If you getting geared up for the big game, Mobb Deep maybe. So respect for you knowing those.
Love it.
Well, Richard, while you're on this tangent, in your restaurants, music in the kitchen, during service, not during service, what are your thoughts?
It's a controversy, to use the British vernacular there. Hey, listen, I love what music does in the dining room. It's been, again, having some Atlanta background, you guys know that like one of the best parts of, when we founded Flip was the music in the dining room. And, even in my restaurants now, it's the energy of a dining room is so important. So music is crucial. Music in the kitchen, it goes both ways. I like to sort of use it as a sort of, a measure of success. Like if we can play music in the kitchen, it means things are going really well. I don't have a problem with listening to music in the home kitchen or the professional kitchen, as long as, the product's being executed well and everyone's doing a good job. But, sometimes you got to turn it down if you got to get some food out of the door. But yeah, I think it's a big part. I mean, energy is just is an amazing thing, especially for the kitchen. So as a younger chef, straight from like these restaurants like the French Laundry, I was sort of anti-music in the kitchen and anti-fun in the kitchen, right? We talked about the Sabin Keller sort of thing. And it's just, that's not how it is in the world right now. Like you have to make your business environment a place where people want to work. They have so many choices to make. So you do want to make sure, using the sort of whether it's Google or Apple, that you're providing these perks that make people actually want to come to work each day.
Yeah, absolutely. So to stay on the topics of restaurants, you moved to San Diego, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago,
yeah.
And you left Atlanta. I think you were part of the restaurants there for a while. Then you kind of broke our hearts and went full West Coast. What was the decision making there, and maybe the transition process like? Was it just you felt like you couldn't get over the East Coast enough?
Listen, I mean, it hurts me to even hear like, then you left us, right? Or then you broke our heart. and I know we know each other now a little bit, and I know that there's, some humor behind that. I made a name for myself in Atlanta. I miss so much, the people in the communities of Atlanta, and just like there's a vibe there and a culture that, is really unparalleled. I'm an adventure guy. I like new adventures, so I worked in California. There was always sort of in the back of, our family's minds that we were going to go to the West Coast. And then it ended up being San Diego. I'm a native New Yorker. I still have a dream that one day we're going to do a project in New York or around New York. So it's kind of weird. I think, I live in San Diego and, West Coast, but like Atlanta's still a big part of me. I'm always going to say I'm a New Yorker. And it's kind of a great part about the world we live in right now. It's like, does it really matter like where you sleep most of the time? I travel so much. So yeah, I don't even know if I'm answering your question. I should be a politician. I'm talking and people are nodding their heads, but I don't know if I've answered everything. I miss Atlanta. I'd love to come back. It's,
I love it.
I do think that, I'm learning, that there's, about market and about the challenges of different markets. And certainly I had my ups and downs in Atlanta, but I'll never forget, how great that city was to me and what it helped, what it provided me.
Well, and Sean, I'll let you jump in here in a second real quick while we're talking about the Atlanta restaurants. And I heard the Flip Burger over on Roswell Road just closed.
It did, yeah. So, I mean, I'm not operational. I haven't been for a while operationally involved with Flip, and I did found it. I'm incredibly proud of what we did there. I mean, it was, probably it was the first better burger concept, maybe in the Southeast. that first location is still open. There's still a couple stores that are doing it, one in Birmingham, Alabama, and one in Midtown. I love the team there. A lot of lessons that I learned, from in the fast casual space. I'll always, that's always a heartfelt sort of thing, what we did at Flip, because it's a concept that I really loved. And, it certainly got me to the place where I'm at now.
So Richard, one of the questions I get a lot from the entrepreneurial chef audience is how to get started in their concept. So just to kind of dial it back a little bit, what was that process like for you to launch your first concept, the first place, first restaurant establishment? What was this process like for you?
Yeah, and when you say that, I just want to make sure. So like a restaurant that would be called a concept. So like Flip or Crack Shack that I'm a part of right now.
Yes, yeah, we can say that.
Sure. Well, I think it kind of works for anything, but I think if you're going to get into the restaurant game, if we're talking like in the tech space, it's always tech talk to talk about pain points. And, I developed this product because, I was, walking through the airport and I hated carrying my luggage. So I developed a self-driving suitcase, right? Like that's, that's the typical sort of like, tech philosophy. And I think that it works in all businesses. And I think that, I'm learning about other businesses now. But if I go back and look at the more successful restaurants I've been a part of, they come from that place too. So, in burgers, my first job was at McDonald's, but then I became a chef. Well, could those two worlds come together? There weren't, no one was really tackling a single subject idea like burgers at that point. Like, why can't you have 20 burgers and have different proteins, and what defines a burger? So, there was like in the creation of Flip, this personal pain point. We kind of use that again for Crack Shack out here on the West Coast. And I think that's important. If it's like, I just want to cook good food and have a restaurant, like that's not enough. Like, if you're opening up a restaurant, you really sort of need to write down what you're trying to accomplish. And I do think, when we talk about concept restaurants, what helps is knowing, hey, we're going to try and execute just 1, 2, or 3 things really, really well, and focus on that instead of saying, well, my aunt likes this, my uncle likes this, my wife wants to do this, my friends want to do this, and then we're going to try and do something for everybody. That's really tough to do that, and a lot of restaurants try that.
You guys for Crack Shack have a number of locations now. What do you see kind of is the plans to continue to grow your management team? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, well, a Crack Shack is really interesting because there's so many amazing people that are involved. It came from sort of the success of Juniper and Ivy, which is my more fine dining restaurant in San Diego. My partner, Mike Rosen, bought sort of the lot that Juniper and Ivy sits on. And we had this little space that was, literally a shack. That's where the shack part of it comes, crack as in cracking eggs. He really, really is obsessed with chicken. I, like most chefs, have a thing for eggs and the technique of egg cookery. No one was really doing that. I think that was important when we're talking about developing a concept too, was people do fried chicken. People were doing chicken restaurants, but no one was doing a chicken and egg restaurant. And even at the time of Crack Shack's beginnings, other people were starting to do just like little egg sandwich restaurants. So it was kind of a great sort of combination. That first little location, which is another thing, always just start with one. Like, I think anyone who wants to build 500 restaurants before, having one successful, that's always a recipe for failure. And then people showed up the first day, which is always a surprise. And they showed up so much that we ran out of chicken. And, to speed up the story, we have, now 3 locations in Southern California. We just opened up Orange County a few months ago. And we have at least 2 locations opening up in Los Angeles this year. And I think at that point, by the end of 2018, we'll have at least 5 stores open. We'll have lots of data. We'll have tons of metrics. And if these next 2 stores perform anywhere like 3, I would think that that's a pivotal moment where, you want to sort of go from 5 to 10, and then can you go from 10 to 50 sort of situation. But that is new territory for me. So we'll see. Flip Burger got to 5 locations. I wasn't as involved with this sort of growth when Flip started growing. So, hopefully I'm going to learn a lot of lessons and see how we're going to tackle growth here.
A little bit ago, you had mentioned, especially with the music, about keeping the employees happy and making it fun. So let me ask, in relation to that, how do you find top talent, number one. How do you keep top talent?
Wow. I mean, I think that is, if I had to say what is Crack Shack done incredibly well, it's talent, right? So, our culinary director, John Sloan, was the executive chef of Juniper and Ivy. Our basically our operations manager. These are all partners at this point. Dan Pena, he was the GM of Juniper and Ivy. So, I think the way to keep talent is with growth, quite honestly. As a matter of fact, I would say that the most important thing for me right now with a concept like Crack Shack is that the concept grows, not to make necessarily more money, but just to retain the talent, so that when we do get ready for big growth, we have, sort of created our own, team and system, so that we're not having to just hire, from outside of the, of the system, if that makes any sense. It's kind of like a baseball team. We're sort of developing, a couple rungs of training and management level. So the key is retaining that talent, finding it first, which is, sometimes tough, but then retaining it by having those people grow. Like, I want a, line cook to become a sous chef, and that sous chef to become an executive chef. And I truly want to sit down with that person in their first interview and say, hey, this is what can happen in 5 years, and let's work on those 5-year plan. The other side is, even if people don't want to grow with you, I'm really all about finding out what gets an employee going. Like, I don't expect servers in my restaurant to want to be servers in our restaurants 5 years from now. Some of them might want to be managers, but more likely they want to be artists or photographers or teachers or scientists or whatever else they have going on in their world. And if I know that, in an initial interview, it'll really help us get them closer to their goal and allow us to sort of work with them, because we know what their passions are, even if it's outside of the restaurant.
I love that.
Right. I mean, it's so true. Like, I'm a big 3-year, 5-year sort of plan person. I think also a lot of employers, I think, they, of course we want to hear that everyone wants to grow with us, but we got to be real. Like, I love when a cook tells me they want to open up a t-shirt company in 2 years. Like, that's great. Like, let's, then we know we can focus not just on the, how to cook or manage a restaurant, but also, enable them to learn a little bit about running the business that will help serve them in their t-shirt business or whatever it is that they want to pursue.
I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of us creative types, including myself, really, especially in the early days, when I opened my restaurant, I didn't have a full understanding of the necessary need to have the systems and processes in place. For you, traveling so much, not being in the restaurants, every single day, I'm sure you have some good systems in place now. Was school helpful for that, or maybe even working at some of the higher end restaurants you've worked at, or has that just been like a growth over your course of your career?
Sort of the management side of it, I think it's really just been a growth over the course of my career, and trying to find that balance between not micromanaging, but also having the ability to have your decisions, and whether it's as a founder or a partner, to be able to have those moments where you're making an impact, with big decisions when you need to. I think the micromanaging for chefs in particular is a tough thing to overcome. I just think for our craft, as chefs, we're micromanagers, right? It's an artist thing, and this is the way the artist wants to do it, and everyone else should do it like this. It took me a little while to sort of learn, there's a bunch of artists here actually, and there's a bunch of craftsmen here. And a good idea is a good idea. It doesn't matter who comes up with it, whether it's the dishwasher or, an investor or a partner. We're all trying to get to the same place. So I think that was tough. At this point, it's actually the reverse. Now I sometimes will walk into one of my places and, feel like, I haven't been there in a week or 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever it is. I've been filming something, I've been traveling, and catching up and making people, feel comfortable. Like, hey, I'm here, use me, bounce an idea off me. Let me taste that. Let's talk about that. I think it's actually now kind of reversed in my career, is trying to figure out a way to sort of, make more of an impact, and actually, micromanage a little bit more at this point.
So when you started stepping away a little bit from the kitchen and doing more, being a little bit more entrepreneurial, having a little bit more ventures, was there a bit of tension as you were doing that, number one? And number two, how did you make that transition?
When you say tension, where's the tension? I mean, I just want to make sure I'm answering it correctly.
Yeah, so for someone that is accustomed to being in the kitchen day in and day out, for that chef that's in, maybe if it's not their restaurant or another restaurant, and they're just used to being in there day in and day out, and then stepping away and maybe doing different projects, maybe not being in the kitchen every day, and not kind of fine-tuning or working on that craft every single day.
Yeah, I mean, tension's an interesting word, because I think that that's a part of like being a celebrity chef, and I've always wanted to cover this on my podcast, Starving for Attention, and we get into it from time to time. But there is, you know, in this world where everyone, again, a lot of people are being entrepreneurial. You know, there is that tension of like, well, you're the chef, you need to be here all the time, and for me, it did take years, you know. And, you know, it took me sort of, you know, going through maybe a couple of partnerships or relationships before I realized that the key is really just being honest about everything. Right. So, you know, and having the ability to say, you know, hey, we're going to sign this contract or we're going to get into this partnership, but I just want to be clear, you know, my involvement is going to be X amount of days, or, you know, this is how it's going to work. So I think that is tough, especially when you're first starting to sort of become more than just a chef, because you don't really know if the phone's going to keep ringing, you know, or the television shows are going to continue to want to cast you. But now it's just about honesty and on both ends. You know, for me, as someone who is, whatever you want to say it is, an entertainer, someone who gives talks and lectures, someone who's running other businesses, is just being honest with those partners and say, hey, I can only physically be a part of this, you know, for this many days, a month, a quarter, a year, whatever that specific deal is. Hey, I also do these things. I think that, you know, my work on Instagram or on Food Network or with Top Chef will also help benefit the business. But here are these other relationships I have, and here's how I sort of go about my work. It's just honesty. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is a tough sort of you know, map to navigate, especially early on.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, I had that exact same tension. You know, I'd have to leave early for during prep for a morning TV segment, and it's like, well, Chris, we're expecting you to be here today, and well, I have this that hopefully will help the restaurant on the back end. So I definitely have been there before. For you, with your time, you know, traveling so much, you have the family back home. How do you manage your time? What do you have any maybe apps or things you do that help you to stay focused and stay on top of what needs to get done?
Yeah, I wish you could probably recommend a few things for me, for sure.
Not me, maybe Sean.
Maybe Sean.
I'll give you one when you're done.
Yeah, it sounds perfect. You know, that's something that has to happen, because, you know, through all of the balancing, you know, the fact of the matter is that it's family that sort of, you know, has to suffer the most. Like, that's just a fact of it. And, you know, it's, you know, everything else has a schedule, but family time doesn't really have a schedule. So, you know, that is certainly just a social challenge of, you know, I'm lucky and blessed that my wife is amazing. And, you know, one of the reasons we have a podcast is, you know, because we get to, you know, it's also a way for us to spend time together, which sounds a little crazy. But that's probably one of the pain points of why we started a podcast, so that we could hang out more together and we could force ourselves to be more social. But yeah, that's kind of tough. I mean, I think this year is a big, for me, I think meditation is a hot topic right now. I think there's all these, you know, meditation apps. And, you know, sort of, I do think, although, you know, we are all absolutely obsessed with our, you know, phones and our devices, you know, this year for me, I am starting to put in place, hey, you know, at least until after I drop the kids off at school, you know, don't look at your phone. You know, my wife has always been a big, you know, proponent of, you know, no screen time. You know, once we go to the bedroom and it's time to just sleep, you know, or pillow talk or whatever it is, you know, don't turn the phone on. Don't answer every call. It's tough for me because I'm frenetic. And like, I literally, if I could be up 24 hours on social media and on different platforms, I would. and bots are pretty much illegal on most platforms. So, we haven't, but it's family that suffers. But, we're like right now we're planning sort of a summer month for the family time, and it's getting ahead of it also, and trying to treat family time almost, it sounds horrible, but, treat family time like you would any other part of your business, and make sure that you're putting aside that time for what is truly your most important team, your family.
Did I see you coaching your daughter's basketball team?
Yes.
On Instagram?
Yes. I'm
Fantastic.
so excited. So excited. Yeah. So this is my first youth basketball, time, coaching my kids' team, and we have a big game tomorrow. So I do get obsessive about everything. So I'm still determining before tomorrow morning whether we're going to run a 3-2 zone or a 1-3-1 zone. I tweeted that out, and I will tell you, it's always weird how like different, platforms work. And I had hundreds of responses of
trapped in the corner.
Right, exactly. And there, people with all sorts, like everyone's got an opinion on how I should run a youth basketball zone defense. I wish I could get that response sometimes with a promoted picture of something. But I think that's the key. It's obviously authentic. It's been a lot of fun for sure.
Well, I'll give you a technology piece of advice for scheduling if you give me a tip on how to raise a daughter, because I got a 1-year-old.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm not, the one to give out the, I don't have it locked down either. So like, that's something that I'm learning and growing. And I think the most important thing about, just general, just trying to be a good person is realizing that you're not flawless, and that, we're going to make mistakes all the time. And just realizing that and being observant of the fact that, we're all going to make mistakes. How do you get through them? Which is basically like, how do you be a good chef? Everything's going to go wrong. And what's the contingency plan? Like that's how it is. That's how you run a restaurant.
And so you mentioned the podcast. So you had said that, and I think it was jokingly but true for you and your wife to be able to spend a little time with it. But was there other inspiration for creating this podcast, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to the personal pain point. I was becoming, I was really into podcasts, and I realized that there weren't too many food podcasts, and the ones that were about food were almost, the old SNL skit with Alec Baldwin and Anna Gasteyer, and they're talking about zucchini and what they made. We made this zucchini bread Saturday, and that's to me boring. So. And I really love the under the surface and in the cracks and crevices of everything, but our industry, and it's trying to talk to chefs and television chefs about our world, but not about recipes and not necessarily just about their projects and sort of soundbite material. So, our hope is to bring in, different guests and just kind of talk about our world, but have it not be in that, sort of soundbite sort of thing. So the long form, probably why you're doing your podcast as well. You just get a lot more out of people when you have, an hour to chop it up.
Absolutely. You should definitely check out the Unpodcast with Scott Stratton and Allison Stratton, another husband and wife team. We had him on our podcast not too long ago. Richard, I've heard you talk about maybe not your legacy necessarily, but kind of what you'll be known for, and that being kind of with where the future of the industry is going with technology. Could you just maybe touch on that and what you see yourself doing?
Yeah, but I will say that, I'm a firm believer that, to make something happen, you have to start saying it. You have to start believing it, even if you don't know where it's going to eventually go. That if you want to be a chef, when you're a cook, you have to say, I'm going to be a great chef and I want to be a great chef. So, legacy is one of those weird things. I'm so far away from even, saying legacy. But I do think that at this point in my career now, I mentioned earlier how it would bother me that I was a science, sort of known as a weird science chef and someone who created outrageous food. Now I'm sort of comfortable with myself as a performer, and I've my voice is super, I feel like it's authentic because, it is, it's my voice. Now it's time to sort of get back into some of those things, that put me on in the first place. So I do think that, I'm doing a lot of talks about technology and, and what's next in our industry, and whether it's food or restaurants specifically. So I do think it's going to be tech. I'm not sure what it is. I had the dream for a hot minute last year to launch a drone donut delivery service called Dronuts, which most of my work just starts with a good pun, to just be clear. It just starts with a good pun. But I do think whether it's, voice activation, again, where, maybe it's drones, autonomous something, the smart kitchen. I do think that at some point, I'm going to, dive in, head first into the sort of food tech sector, and that's going to be sort of the next thing that I realize I can spend, 22 hours a day on.
Nice. Yeah, I say augmented reality, that kind of coming into play, particularly with restaurants and food establishments, and maybe it's an app where people then can see the chef making what's on the menu, or something where they put it over the menu, the phone. I could see that coming into play, which is a really interesting something that may be coming.
Yeah, we're on the same page. Augmented reality, I think everyone, if you don't know the difference, I think, people want to talk about virtual reality. You're going to agree, of course, that, we're a little further away from like virtual reality. But augmented reality, the average person doesn't realize, when they're playing Pokemon or when they're throwing up a Snapchat filter on their selfie, that they're already in the world of augmented reality.
Right.
Yep.
And I do think, as also being a big sports guy, we talked about this early, like there's also, I think the thing that I'm going to really do is going to have something to do with statistics and numbers and that sort of overlap where, maybe there's an augmented reality, but now we're just brainstorming and spitballing, but where you can walk into a kitchen, and maybe it's even your kitchen, and you want to just get data on your team, and using augmented reality, you can get, stats on all your cooks and servers and how far they've walked and run. And, almost like how the NFL drops over stats and graphics, or how baseball or basketball does it now. So I think there's some hidden numbers also in our industry that we haven't talked about, but I'm all about the augmented reality. And I think even if it's a game, right? I mean, so talk about secret menus. Well, what if, your device, can pick up, you walk into a restaurant and only your device can pick up what the secret menu item is of the day by, looking at a tabletop or something like that. So lots of big things to happen with AR.
Yeah, I'm going to get, Chris, I'm sorry, I'm going to get super, super nerdy here, but with machine learning combined with augmented reality, like you said, with the stats, I could see that, all of those worlds colliding. I'm right there with you, Richard.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, we could have a talk. We could just go through the top, 12 things, top 12 things that could happen in the next couple of years. And it's like, I feel like, just like I felt like as a chef that I was behind, I know that with all of this stuff, you and I are talking about it right now. Someone's out there, actually developing the system. So come hit me up, because I could be the expert for one of those guys. Yeah, it's exciting stuff. But it's weird, because I also feel like the restaurant world or the cooking world is one of the last sort of businesses where there's an appeal to not have it intercept with tech. Like if you look about where trends are going, in the fine dining world, it's like, this is a restaurant that only cooks on a wood-burning stove, right? Here's a restaurant that only uses ingredients from its backyard. There's almost this, not a backlash, but this, in the restaurant and food world, this appeal to having things not reliant on tech. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on both sides of that equation.
Absolutely.
And definitely on the back end too, you can even use blockchain for delivery systems and understanding the growth of vegetables and produce, all that kind of stuff.
That's insane. Yeah, I will say that now you're into a part of the world that I'm not too familiar with when we start talking blockchain and Bitcoin, and that's something I need to do a little bit more personal work.
Well, that's why I stopped talking.
There you go. Fair enough.
So I did want to reflect back really quick on the podcast, because you have that, but for some of the people that are interested in maybe doing something similar, or launching a podcast or something like that, what was this process like for you? Maybe lessons learned, and kind of what you've learned a little bit along the way in this time that you have launched it.
Yeah, that's interesting. What I think, and most of this now is just from getting, I think we're 30 or so episodes in. The podcast world, as far as like the behind the scenes of it, was something that I didn't know much about. What I think I've realized, and I'm not saying that it's accurate, is that the podcasting world, the vlogging world, is really just it's another social media platform. If you look at the metrics of a podcast, what's really interesting is that it's very different than a TV show, right? It kind of lives forever. It goes in this library, and each episode can actually grow, just by kind of sitting in that library. and that your followers and your viewers or your listeners just becomes a very organic sort of thing that isn't, dependent on just, one moment, and I think that to me has been really refreshing coming from, the television world where I've had shows that are reliant on how many people just watched it on Wednesday night. And here's the numbers for that. And so I think that it's kind of a little, it's soothing actually, to know that, in the podcast world, the vlogging world, the social media world, that there's a much more longer curve to it, and that, if you just keep doing good work, you'll get more listeners. If the content's good, you'll get more followers. So that's been something that I'm just learning right now, that it's sort of another social platform.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Richard, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you. Any kind of final words of wisdom from the man himself for anyone out there listening?
Wow. I mean, just, I kind of, I wish that I wasn't as old as I am right now, right? I wish I wasn't a 40-something, and that, especially for any young entrepreneurs that you have, it doesn't matter what the game is, right? If it's food, it's food. If it's not, it doesn't matter. If you're flipping sneakers online or you're in the tech space, just like go for it, and like, this is, again, I tell my cooks, the cooks that want to do the t-shirt companies, or they want to develop they want to have their own knife line or whatever. Like, we live in a world right now where, like, your dream can really come true and you can make it happen pretty quickly. And don't be afraid, especially the people that are cooks and chefs. Like, our industry sort of for the longest time, wanted, all the attention to just be on the face of the project or the executive chef or whatever it is. Like, now's the time where all you have to do is open up a social media account and you've started your business. All you have to do is have, one page on a website and you've started your business. Like, you can do it. You can start now. And like, just go for it, and you'd be surprised. Also, growth is so fun when you start at zero, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, what I'm learning right now is it's really when you start talking about, I have I have 500,000 Twitter followers. Growth is really hard because, like, 10 followers kind of, you lose the appeal of like going from 0 to 10 followers. Like, start, because the start is so exciting, and growth can be so fun when you go from 0 to 100.
When you frame it the right way and you embrace that process, I think that's where some people don't frame it the right way, but when you frame it the right way, 100%, it's very exciting. Yeah.
Exactly. So just go for it, and hit me up online at Richard Blais across all social platforms. And again, I'm in a mode where I don't mind responding to an email or a text message or a DM. If you got a question, let me know, and I might have the answer, or I might be able to put you, connected to someone who might have that answer.
Thank you so much, man.
Of course. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
So that was our conversation with Richard Blais. Sean, that was too much fun, man. What did you pull out of it?
Number one, I loved how he was a 90s hip hop guy. That was awesome to hear. There was definitely a couple of different things. One of them in particular, I thought it was really neat that he's making a conscious decision to be connected with his fans on a 1-to-1 ratio. If someone takes a step toward him, he said he'll take a step back. I think that speaks to his character and him being very genuine and him understanding the dynamic that people are looking toward him for either inspiration or motivation, and him reciprocating back with it instead of just taking it for granted. I thought that was really, really, really neat, and a good lesson for people that are approaching to be in his position potentially, or starting to get fans and followers. Another thing that I thought was really neat was his perspective on growth. When he said toward the end that growth can be so much fun, essentially, when you go from 0 to 10 or 10 to 100. The one piece that I chimed in on was that I think some people, and I'm guilty of it as well, when I started at 0, I had my sights on either 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000, whatnot. And in 10, I almost took it, not almost, I did, I'll admit it. I took it for granted. Like, I was only 10, or, it's only 100. It's only 200. But his perspective is so much more productive. And it is, when I look back, it is so much fun starting from 0 if you have that right frame of mind. And I really wish that we would have connected with him when I was starting out, so I could have had that frame of mind, because I think it's brilliant. So for anybody that's starting at 0, embrace it. It can be so much fun to grow from 0. So what about you, Chris?
Yeah, and I think you can apply that mindset to a lot of other different things in life. We didn't touch on it in the conversation we had with him, but I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, he was like severely overweight and he lost like 60 pounds. Now he runs marathons, and he obviously had to start at way higher than 0 and work backwards. But that first kind of starting out point probably wasn't a whole lot of fun, but seeing the progress, I'm sure has been really rewarding. So I definitely agree. I think you can definitely take it with whatever you do in life. I liked how towards the beginning he talked about the curiosity that he has really been something that's helped him through his career and to help understand kind of what he wants to do with his career. For a long time, he was known for the molecular astronomy guy, using liquid nitrogen and doing crazy stuff on TV, the chemist, but which I think definitely helps you to keep growing and learning and finding new ways to do things. But you could tell just in his day-to-day, listening to podcasts and books and learning about technology, that he has this constant, thirst for knowledge, which I think, Sean, probably all of our guests thus far had that in common. They just want to keep learning and growing and getting better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was our conversation with Richard Blais. You can find him over online. Just type in Richard Blais, Blais. And definitely check out his podcast. I've had a lot of fun listening to it. It's called Starving for Attention. And he talks about the food world, but it's really more than that. It's a lot of just kind of pop culture life stuff that he hosts with his wife. So it's a lot of fun. And we would love to hear what you think. So share this with your friends, leave us a comment. And with that, we're going to leave you with a quote from Richard Blais. Start now. Just go for it. Because growth is so much fun when you start from 0. And with that, we're signing off.